So every stage of my career so far, there has been a strategy. I have very little time to look for a sponsorship visa. At the time that I was applying, the company hasn't even registered as a company yet. I would first go on to search venture capital in London. I miss my parents and appreciate them a lot more. It's a spring roll.
What is like moving to London? Is it good? Is it bad? People ask me these questions, and honestly, I don't have a straight answer. 13 years ago, I moved from Vietnam to the UK to study and then work. And after all this time, I've realized that it is such a nuanced journey that we don't talk about enough, and we shouldn't have to do it alone. Hi, I'm Ellen, and that's why I'm here with my video podcast series, Landed. It's all about finding your way and building a life abroad. I'll be interviewing people just like you and me who took a chance on themselves, made them move, and have landed here in the UK with a sponsored job. They will share what it's really like to pursue this path and what they did to get to where they are today. Our guest today came from Vietnam to the UK at 16. She was born in Long An, a province in the south of Vietnam. She went to university in the UK and then looked for jobs while on a graduate visa. She started with an internship, then she joined early stage venture bike startup as the first hire, and now she's an investor relations analyst at the VC, where she sponsored after passing probation. To me, this is definitely not a linear career progression, and not the usual sponsorship path either. I have actually never met anyone from Vietnam on a visa doing startup and VC jobs like this. So I'm very excited to talk to our guest today, An, to hear more about her journey, how she landed these elusive jobs, and how she got sponsored and her experiences living in the UK. An, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you. Absolutely been an honor to be the first guest on your podcast on this amazing project that you're doing. I don't know if you remember, but when we first met, it was about like a year and a half, 2 years ago. At that point, I was just recently graduate university and still figured out what I wanted to do. And you were still at your banking job. And fast forward to now, I'm at a job that I absolutely love. And I'm here at your podcast. So it's a great day. It's fantastic to be here.
I remember that quite a while ago when we first met, and you was at your startup, and I was actually very, very impressed because I never heard anyone on a visa can get into doing these startup roles. I really want to get into that journey and how you got the experiences and then obviously ended where you are today. So can you walk us through your timeline from when you first came to the UK till now?
I first came to the UK at 16 on a scholarship. I was at an international boarding school for about 2 years doing A-levels. Then I went to university in Manchester. I did psychology there, actually.
I did psychology as well.
I know. Well, that was one of the big reasons why I reached out to you when I was wondering what I should do with my career, because I know that you were on a similar path. Then after university, I wanted to move to London. So I found a job in London and moved to London in June or July 2022. Then I got my second job in April 2023. I finished my job there and leave the startup in December 2023. Then I got the offer for the VC in January 2024, and I started in February. And finally, I passed my probation in June, and I got my skilled worker visa in August.
When did your graduate visa expire, like would have expired?
November this year.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
So it's quite close as well.
It's quite close. I was a bit nervous, but to be fair, when I received the job offer, I already asked about my visa situation and they said they will sponsor. So around January time, I already know that that's secure.
Nice. Okay, we will talk specifically about that because I really want to like get to the bottom of that. Like, how did you make that happen? Because I think a lot of people, when they hear VC startup jobs, they think it's too out there, and usually it's not really the usual sponsorship. Especially VC firms, they're not really publishing that many jobs online, right?
Exactly.
And then people don't know how to even do that. Okay, so I'm curious. Do you have any strategy behind your career, or how did you get here?
So every stage of my career so far, there has been a strategy, but the strategy changes at different stage. So my strategy when I was in my third year of uni applying for a graduate scheme, that for me was the first one and possibly the worst one. My strategy at the time is a number game. If I apply to enough graduate scheme, eventually one will stick. So I was frantically applying to different graduate scheme in different industry. There was consulting, there was the usual banking route, there was marketing, there was anything I could possibly get my hands off. Of course, it wasn't successful. It was a lot of effort. It was a long journey. It was difficult, but I think it wasn't the best way to go around it. So my second strategy at the time was when there's no graduate scheme anymore. I'm graduated in June. I have no job. So my next strategy is, what is the low-hanging fruit that I can apply to? What is the industry that my CV is best geared toward? And where do I want to be? I know that I want to be in London, and I have a lot of experience doing event at the time. So I look for event agency in London, but I didn't want to pigeonhole myself in event itself. So doing my research, I found a category called brand experience, which is anything from event to pop-up to marketing, guerrilla marketing strategy for corporate clients. So then I start applying to those jobs. And that's when I got my first internship. While at my internship, I know that I have very little time to look for a sponsorship visa. So I do not waste any time with any unemployment period. So while at my internship, I was also looking for another job. And this next strategy is then informed by what I like and do not like about my current internship at the time. So my strategy at the time is a bit now more intentional. I know that I want to be closer to the decision-making process. When I'm servicing the investment bank, it's a massive bank with multiple divisions. By the time any project, any task landed onto me, I am so detached from where the decision is being made. I have no context and no understanding of why they choose to do this campaign or why they choose to host an event in Cape Town instead of Munich. So then for me to be at such an early stage in my career and want to be that close to those conversations, the solution would be an early stage startup or the early stage company. The earlier the company, the closer I am to that process. So that's when I start looking around at startups. I looking at not just on LinkedIn. There's a portal called Otter, which is essentially a startup job. So I started looking on there, and then I found a role called a founder associate, which I've never heard of before. So then I started applying, and that's when I got my second role. As for my third role, similar to the strategy of looking for the second role, this time informed by what I like and do not like by my role at the time, which is the founder associate at the startup, I then look for my third one. What I was looking for is essentially, I know that I like the startup environment. I like how dynamic it is. I like a large visibility on the firm. But at the same time, I also want some stability. As we had a conversation at the time, the startup future is unpredictable. So we don't know how the sponsorship process is going to go. So then around the 6-month mark is where I start. Okay, let's see. VC seem to be a natural path. There's more stability there. There is still involved in the startup space, and perhaps a smaller firm where the environment is still quite collaborative and the hierarchy is flat. So that's how I found my third role. I guess throughout the journey, my strategy changed and adapt to what I'm looking for, and I become more informed as I get more experience.
Did you know that you wanted a sponsored job at the end of it? Was it planned?
Absolutely. When I started working for the startup in December, I know that whatever role I take next need to have a sponsorship either right away or promise in a very short horizon.
I like that you make several moves to get to where you are today, because I know a lot of people, when they think about 2-year graduate visa, they tend to get a bit anxious about it, and they're not thinking they can jump steps to then where they want to be, but they would just try to find something and get a sponsor job immediately. But obviously now there is the salary threshold as well, right? So it's get a bit harder for that. And so I like that you moved gradually to where you are, and the point you say that based on your current job, you know what you like and what you don't like, so you get closer and closer what you want to do and your goals. So I think let's go back to the first one, the internship. Can you kind of describe roughly what that internship is and what was the interview process like?
That was a year-long internship for a global brand experience agency. Essentially, they would do any client servicing for their corporate client. So I was placed in an investment bank and I was placed in the client servicing division.
Yeah.
And a lot of it entailed of doing multiple events, talking to the client, talking to the bank investors. So the nature of the job itself doesn't differ much throughout my time there. I was there for 10 months. I didn't fully finish my 12th month before I found my next role. I would say the first 3 months, there was definitely a lot of learning in terms of transitioning from studying to working full-time, especially work in a corporate environment as well. I did learn a lot in terms of the work ethic, in terms of the corporate etiquette. But the nature of the job, once you host one event, two events, eventually when you do it as often as one event a day throughout a year, it's become very repetitive. I noticed that I increasingly getting more efficient at what I was doing. But in terms of the context of the business and learning new things, I was at a stagnant. So that was when I figured I need to find something else.
Yeah. And how was the interview process?
I apply and I have my first conversation with the hiring manager of the agency, then a conversation with the account manager of the client that I will eventually be placed in. And then we have a case study.
Okay.
The case study was a takeaway case study. So it's essentially, they give me a task and then I go away and do it and email the result back to them.
Yeah.
It was quite a short
Okay.
interviewing process since it was an internship.
How did you even find the job posting? Which platform did you go on to find these jobs?
That first job was a little bit rogue.
Okay.
I know what I wanted to do, or more of I know where the sweet spot of my CV is. And when I found the keyword of brand experience, and I know that I wanted to be in London, the first thing I did is to Google the top 10 brand agency in London, and they spit out a result, and I go to all of them. There's only about, let's say, there are less than 20 that is popped up on the very first search. So I went to all of them, go on either on the website or go on the LinkedIn to see if they hire. If they are not hiring, then they tend to have like, if you want to work with us, email your CV and we will get back to you when we have something. So I do all of that. And eventually when I got to the one that I ended up with, they were hiring for an intern. So yeah, so I applied the normal way through their website.
Okay, so they actually have a list of job posts open. But that's what I like and about it, that you actually very proactive about it and not just passively scrolling. I know a lot of people, LinkedIn, nowadays there's a lot of fake jobs on LinkedIn as well.
There's so many fake jobs on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
If anything that you need to remember, do not apply on the easy apply. I think that's the biggest waste of time. Make sure, go on the website to see the job actually exists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, I actually got a job through Easy Apply.
How?
I don't know. I got lucky. I think I got lucky. So let's talk about your founder's associate job, because I actually haven't seen many of these, if not at all, and especially for students on a visa, if not like within Vietnamese community. So I think, how did you find that job and what was the interview process like?
I think that job didn't even exist a few years ago. This is absolutely new to me. The first time I found the job on Alta. So in terms of what the role entail, essentially it means that the startup was at such an early stage, it was just a founder or probably less than 10 people. The role is quite undefined. Whatever they need help with, whatever the founder needs support on, you will do. So it's hard for them to place like customer success or business development, therefore the title founder associate. How I found the job at the time was LinkedIn.
Wait, Alta or LinkedIn?
Alta and LinkedIn.
Okay.
I think I found the keyword a founder associate on Alta.
To where you know there's that role exists.
Exactly.
Yep.
And then I went and searched on LinkedIn. I used multiple platforms at the same time, but the platform that eventually got me to the job that I was at was LinkedIn. So after that, the application process entailed a application form with a video introducing myself, then a call with the founder, then a case study. then another call with the founder to talk about the case study. Then I went to see the founder for a coffee. Then at the time, the startup was venture-backed, meaning it was being invested by a venture capital already. Then I had a conversation with the venture capital that invested in them. And after that, I got the news the same day.
Wow, that's a relatively long process with case study as well.
It was a long process, and after being in a startup, it makes sense because I was the first hire, so I want to make sure that they wanted to hire the right person.
Yeah. And how did you nail that?
For the founder associate interview, the challenging part was that there was so little information about the founder, about the company. At the time that I was applying, the company hasn't even registered as a company yet. There's no website. So I spent a lot of time with the job description. What I did is to construct the profile that they're looking for in my head. I pinned down the 3 keywords. They want someone who can think independently. They want someone who is resourceful. And frankly, it's a startup, so someone who can spend a lot of time working. So my strategy about illustrating these points has always been show, don't tell. So with every opportunity I either have with the recruiter or the founder themselves, I try to weave in as much experience that illustrate these points as possible. And it's not a matter of like, oh, I think that I can spend a lot of hours working or hard working because I just spent a lot of hours as my previous job. It's more about saying things along the line of, I have very high standard for my job, and I would rather spend more time at work to deliver the expectation that I have for myself than to leave a bit earlier. So those things to subliminally send that message and also to show that through evidence. So that was my attitude toward it. And after every interview, I got a little bit more of a clue of how's the founder's like, what he's like. And I also spent some time reading article about just what it's like to work in a startup. And empathize on a lot of points that the founder is facing when I was talking to him. I feel like this process feel a little bit more human as there isn't a established process yet at this company. It's the person here that you need to convince.
How did you find the CV process? I also know that a lot of people applying, they never heard back.
As a CV level, I must admit, there was a few startups that I applied for that I did not hear back. And with this startup, especially for the earliest stage one, the application process is also slightly more convoluted. It's not just about sending your CV and they have a machine to scan the keyword and put you to the next round. It tends to involve telling them about a bit more about yourself. It tends to have a video aspect to it.
Really?
So they have a little bit more of a picture of who you are. They tend to ask you to either describe your experience or why you want to work for a startup or your journey in a 2-minute video. So I didn't hear back from a few companies. My strategy when it's come to applying for startup is that you are taking a risk. So take the most calculated risk as possible. If you're looking for an independent startup, meaning it has not been invested in, look for one that have slightly maybe a bigger team, not just you and the founder yourself. At such an early stage at a startup that I joined, what helped me feel that it's more secure is that it's already been invested by a creditable venture capital. So then there's a bit more of a process.
Did you have to do the video for this job that you got?
I had to do the interview. I did have to do, I think, a 2-minute video.
Sometimes when I scroll Reddit and people say about these video interviews, everyone hates it. Everyone seems to really hate it and think that it's like, why you have to make people do this? How did you feel about that? And
I would honestly prefer the video over a cover letter.
Really?
I feel like it's showcased so much more of myself than the cover letter. I feel like no one's read the cover letter.
What did you actually say in the video? What any tips for people who actually do have to do these videos?
So I would say my tips for these video interview or like these video before an interview for an application is treat it almost like an interview. Use the structure that you would use for an interview, as in give the context, give the solution, the STAR method essentially, and think about the keyword that you want the people to look at the video and take away. So my keyword at the time was then resourceful, can work long hour, and can think independently. So they can either tell you to tell them about yourself or give them an experience of your last job. Think about those keywords. So when I think about the keyword in a tell me about yourself question, in the resourcefulness, I would tell them about my journey of living in the UK by myself. In terms of working long hours, then I will talk about the resilience it takes for me to then applying for a scholarship or apply for my first job, or how my first job was very demanding. And this is the hour that I put in to get the result. So treat it almost like an interview, I would say. And it's a fantastic thing because you have multiple takes to do it. So take your time with it.
So let's talk about your current job and what is the interview process like.
So this job finding process was a lot earlier than the previous job finding process. With the other job, I already know that I didn't want to work here and I want to find something that start as early as possible. And with this one, when I at the founder associate role, I still enjoy doing it, but I was already start browsing for another role. That gave me a lot more time to prepare, and that made me also a lot calmer when it's come to the job finding process. So around the 6-month mark, when I was in a startup, as I mentioned before, I start to find things that I like and things that I don't like. Also understand that it's unpredictable being in a startup. So from an element of I like the startup environment, but one more stability, VC seemed to be the perfect blend, either VC or a venture studio. I would first go on to search venture capital in London, and then I started looking at the job that they advertise, what it takes to work in a venture capital. I also message a lot of people on LinkedIn, especially Vietnamese people. They tend to be more generous with their time when you have similar background where they can empathy a little bit with your journey. So I fortunately had conversation with many people who are working in a venture capital at the time, and they kindly support me with what it's like to work in a venture capital, what it takes. And my tip there would to be go for analysts, go for people who just a little bit ahead of you. Don't go for the MD, don't go for the recruiter. Go for someone who got a job recently and just started, because people are being very generous with their time and give you their time. Come prepare. Don't come and ask questions and you can Google. So I tend to ask what they are looking for, what your firm specifically looking for. If this is a big firm, a reputable firm, this is what they're looking for. Cascading that down to what a smaller firm would look for in a more junior role. So how I got my job right now is actually the head of talent at the venture capital reached out to me while I was still at the startup and said that they had the position that I might be interested in. So we engaged in this conversation and eventually it ended with an offer.
Wow, because I think the founder associate job sound like it's have open doors for sure.
Yeah,
and
it's have definitely open doors.
Both from the skill sets perspective and then from the title and the industry.
Yes.
Right?
I think it's the title, the skill that I've learned, and also I feel like I have changed massively being in the role. In terms of my confidence toward job finding, toward employability, I can see from an angle of this is how a company started. They eventually just people figure things out together. So I feel more confident talking to people of my senior at the current role I'm at, and I think that propelled me through the interviewing process and what they really like about me.
Yeah. I think definitely I've seen from my experience as well that people really sought after like entrepreneurship skills, or like working a startup where you have to like cover everything. So I always say to people as well that if you can't get a job like a founder associate or working for a startup, you can also run your own project.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What they're looking for, I guess, is skill and resourcefulness.
Yeah.
You at such an early stage in your career, you don't have expertise to showcase. You don't have years and years of experience or project under your belt to showcase. What you can showcase is your resourcefulness and the fact that you're willing to learn. And you can do that as a startup very well, or start your own thing.
Okay, so I think the last thing I want to ask, and also very important, is about sponsorship.
Yes.
How did you approach that conversation during the application process with the VC? I think a lot of people probably don't know that VC can sponsor. And so, did you know that? Did you do that research? How did you talk to them about that and then eventually get them to actually sponsor you?
At the time, I didn't know they would sponsor, but I know for a fact I do not want to spend more time with job that cannot sponsor or does not have sponsorship in the horizon or does not know about the status of my visa. So after I think the first conversation, I already mentioned to the talent lead that I'm on a visa. Is it a a deal breaker? Is there a possibility that you will sponsor me in the future? And we approached that conversation quite honestly, and she said, yes, we do and can sponsor it. That's when I know this is a job that I really want to get. And even further down the line of the sponsorship conversation, so this conversation is between me and the talent lead at the time. It's not between me and my manager. It's not between me and other people I work with in the firm. So how do I secure that? So even before my probation meeting, in my one-to-one, I've mentioned it about a few one-to-one before the probation to remind that I am on a visa, just to let them know. And then at my probation, I then remind them and ask them, when they ask if you have any more question, I would ask, so what is the verdict? What is this decision? And then after the probation, they kickstart a sponsorship process.
So before we go into the next part of the conversation, I actually have something for us to try and enjoy together. To our viewers, in Vietnamese culture, one of the ways that we bond is through food. So today we're gonna try Vietnamese food, which is spring rolls. And I got it from a shop around here. I know spring rolls now, they are quite common, but to Vietnamese people, we know what authentic food is like. And I do think that spring rolls are quite hard to make actually. And my favorite ones are from my mom. And so I quite picky when it comes to spring rolls. So we want to try and see how it goes. To describe this, we are basically holding each one of us a plate of spring roll each. And now we're gonna try it. And just for context, how you normally eat spring rolls?
So for my family, we tend to make spring roll either around, I think around like Lunar New Year's time, around like that time. That's when my mom make it.
Yes,
in terms of where we see it, I see a lot of it in vendors where we have like bún thịt nướng, noodles, a salad, and they would add a spring roll if you would like to.
Well, I think when I was in Vietnam, I didn't eat that often because it takes a lot of time and effort, and your moms don't like to buy them from outside, so they make it and it takes a long time, so only like special occasion.
Oh god, it takes so much time. I wanted to do one because I had a really good one recently, and this really close to the one that my mom make, and I look at the process of making it. You need to put taro, you need to put carrot, you need to put the wood ear mushroom. There's so much involved rather than just putting meat into a spring paper, a rice paper.
Okay, let's try this one.
Should we review the
we wait and then
experience?
Okay. What do you think?
It's a spring roll.
But you know what? I have to say first that this is not authentic, isn't it?
No, it's not. I'm so sorry. It's not. It is a spring roll. It's not a bad spring roll.
But it is not Vietnamese spring roll.
It is not a Vietnamese spring roll. It's a spring roll.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this was bought from a Vietnamese restaurant that have things like chè, which is a very authentic,
we're a very niche
thing.
Cuisine in Vietnam. It's not as popular as pho or like nowadays bún bò Huế. So you would expect their spring roll to be like slightly different.
Do you cook Vietnamese food?
I do. I absolutely love cooking Vietnamese food. I cooked so much Vietnamese food when I was in university because I didn't have a lot of money to go and eat Vietnamese food at Vietnamese restaurant, and I crave so many things. So I spend so much time cooking.
One thing I noticed is when I go back to Vietnam, I just eat a lot because food just feels so natural. I think that's something that I miss when I moved to the UK. You just don't have that constant familiarities of food that you grow up eating.
And there's a comfort around eating as well. For me, when I see my friends, when we go out to eat, it's not a matter of I'm hungry, let's go for food. It's more of the food is there for the conversation to circulate around. So we talk, we spend good time together, eating food that we enjoy. And it's just a bonding experience as opposed to an efficient experience where we need to eat.
And where do you go for good authentic spring rolls in London?
I don't tend to go to a restaurant to get spring roll, but one of my recent favorite Vietnamese shop is Go in Soho. Because they have hủ tiếu, which is a slightly more niche noodle soup from the south of Vietnam. Often you see pho, so that's the only place in London I've seen that make hủ tiếu.
Speaking of eating and cooking at home, how has it been living here in the UK?
It has been a bit of a journey, I must admit. When I first come to the UK, it was a different journey. And after I finished education and start working in itself is a different experience. When I first got to the UK, I was surrounded by a lot of other international students. It was an international school. We spent a lot of time together. And I was at home quite often as well. I was home every summer. I was home for 2 months at the time. So I didn't feel as homesick as I do now. Now, as I live by myself, I work and I essentially take care of myself. There are two things. Essentially, the support bubble becomes smaller as your friends have their own career, your friends move away. You don't have the common place of the school where you see your friends every day anymore. So it's harder to see them. And especially in London, it's almost impossible to make a same day plan. So then I spend quite a lot of time with myself. And also, as I started out my career right now, I also have a sense of what must have been for my parents themselves to start our career, to eventually get to a point where they can pay for my education for me to live in this Western world comfortably. So that plus spending more time with myself, I miss my parents and appreciate them a lot more. So I would say I feel a lot more homesick at the moment.
Oh,
yeah, especially with, like you mentioned, we can't go home 2 months at a time anymore. It's about like 2 weeks at most now. So, yeah.
How often do you go back to Vietnam?
Ever since I started working, because there was COVID at the time as well. When I was at university, I didn't go home for 2 years. Then I went home for Christmas 2023 to 2024 New Year. No, Christmas 2022. Then I go for Lunar New Year 2024.
Yeah. And do you live with flatmates now?
It's a flat share situation. It's a big house where people have their own bathroom. I have my own kitchen, so it's almost feel like I'm living in a studio or like my own apartment.
Are you close to your housemates?
I do have housemate that I'm friends with, but because we're all working professional and I get home at around 10 p.m. So I don't tend to see them that very often.
Yeah. No, it is definitely, I think, a challenge, especially in the UK, because it's such a different culture from Vietnam, where everything here closed so early.
Exactly. And as apparently I've heard from my friend recently as well, the people in Vietnam, when they work together, they actually become very close friends. But here, there's a clear separation between your work friends and your friends. You don't tend to message people on WhatsApp after like working hour just to hang out.
Yeah. But the community aspect, I think, is a kind of big change.
Yeah, it's quite an individualistic culture, I would say.
Yeah, I think that each has the pros and cons. And on the homesickness side, it's not very good on that, isn't it?
Now I do make more of an effort to go home when I have the time, especially, again, a good thing about working in a firm with less people is that people are more understanding of your situation. So I can take more time off work or I can work remotely if needed.
Has there been anything that you've done more to help you feel more part of community, or you feel less of that aloneness, or you feel fine with it, or how do you kind of cope in general?
At the moment, I find something that surprisingly simple but very helpful that I overlook over the time is just to be engaged with the people around me. Because I grew up here essentially from I was 16, so I kind of adopt the same culture where I keep things very separate. Work is work and friends is friend. So when I engage in workplace conversation with my colleagues, I tend to keep it very professional and tend to be very work-based or very polite. I rarely share part of myself. I really share what I'm doing at the time when I first started working. But now I engage in the conversation a little bit more. And I find that if you genuinely listen and ask them questions and want to get to know them, they would want to reciprocate. And then those work, yes, they are still professional relationship, but it's feel a bit warmer, it's feel more personable. So after work, I don't feel like I've just spent a day with myself or just spend a day being polite to people and have to portray a certain facade for work. I feel as though I've interacted with people, I've talked to people that genuinely care about me. So I would say be more engaged and care about the others, and the care will be reciprocated.
Yeah. I think as someone who's been here for 13 years, so I can give a perspective that it does feel easier over time because you feel more integrated into the community here, or you feel like you have been here long enough to feel natural here than I think a lot of time you might feel like an outside person looking in.
Exactly. Yeah. I did feel a little bit of that, especially at my first job. The event industry or the brand experience agency is not a very international space. So
it's very normal.
It's not a lot of people who can empathize my experience.
Yeah, but like you say, with your job strategy as well, you recognize what worked and what didn't, and then you look for more jobs for the next job that suit that more. So I suppose your current job is more international as well, right?
Yeah, people are more international. There are international people at my firm as well. And I guess when you have so little time to look for a sponsorship job, being on a graduate visa, it's really important for the learning and integrating process to be quicker. Learn very quickly what you don't like your current job. Use that to inform your next decision or the next search.
Yeah. Okay, I want to end on a positive note. So what would be the one thing that you want people to take away from your experience and your journey?
Something that I've now adopted, which again, very gratefully, I have learned this while at a startup, is that I feel a little bit more confident to just take action and learn through failing. The thing that we say a lot of the time
Is it fail fast? No.
Fail fast. Yes, it's very similar to that. Fail fast. Whenever I don't know, when I was at a startup, I don't know how much to price an item or what to sell. And I talked to the founder, he's like, "Oh, try it and we'll see if it sells, then it sells, if it doesn't, then it doesn't." And then we learn from there. And similarly, when I was doing the pitch deck for our investor and I was working with the general partner and I said, "Oh, I don't know whether this content is going to work." He's like, "Oh, let's try it. I have a meeting in 2 days. Let's just put it out, see how I present, see how they reciprocate." And then we change from there. So I have adopted that to my personal life as well. So if there's a job that you're not sure you're going to get, if an interview you're not sure you're going to be successful at, just try, do it poorly, and then you've learned. You might do it well, you never know.
Just go for it, and then you'll see how it goes and you learn from the experience.
And lean into the failure a little bit. Don't take it too personally. That was my mistake when I first applied for a graduate scheme. I took every rejection very personally, as if I'm not good enough for that role. And with every role I apply for, like less competitive one or the one that I want a bit less, thinking that it will give me more of a shot. But just lean into the failing, because you can only get better.
Yeah. Fail forward.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining me and sharing so many valuable insights. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that and can learn from that. Thanks to our viewers for tuning in as well. So see you soon for another episode of Landed. Hi, thank you so much for watching and listening. I hope you enjoy it. To support the show, remember to like, subscribe, and leave comments. You can also follow me on Instagram at An Nguyễn Official, where I post content more regularly. See ya!